Kamal Khan, our real introduction of him comes in the backgammon scene, right? We saw him before, but we're really introduced to him in the backgammon scene where he is doing what? He's cheating. Just like who?
No heroin.
What's his face? Goldfinger, right?
Goldfinger, exactly.
Yeah.
So we have our same little, he's cheating some poor sap who's like,
damn, always a 666 when you need it.
Always.
Unfortunately, the Major never gets his money back in the same way that the guy in Goldfinger does. But it's, once again, to McCurdy's point, we're always referencing another Bond movie, just in a different way, which isn't a bad thing, but it's fun to point out. And then, what does Turban Guy do with the dice?
Yeah,
Crushes him.
Just like comment below if you know better than these fucking guys.
Odd Job. Oh,
just like fucking Odd Job.
Yeah.
Breaking the golf balls. Yeah.
Is it definitely referencing and not recycling? Because I feel like recycling
Same
is
thing.
You're
It's the same
being
thing.
lazy and you can't think of new stuff. But if it's referencing, it's on purpose, and you're like calling back. I don't know.
I think it's like when people say, "What's an homage?" Is it like respecting something you love, or is it ripping off? And it's like you can argue either way.
I don't think it's
it's certainly not
somewhere
bad
in the middle
because it's completely different.
Yeah,
it's done completely differently,
Yeah,
even
I
though
don't
it's the
even
same stuff.
think about or notice it, honestly.
Yeah,
somewhere in the middle.
But
it's interesting that it's like the first time we see that game because going into it, I was like, oh, they're gonna play Baccarat. And then I was like, oh, they're not. Baccarat.
Yeah.
Baccarat.
And that's what I mean.
They're playing backgammon.
It's the same but different. It's a good way of going about
Nice.
it. Once Bond gets back to, I guess they're driving around Germany because he's going to jump off into East Berlin to chase down the train. M says,
We verified the Octopussy Circus was in East Berlin when we lost 009.
but don't you think that if 009 was a goddamn clown, you might look into what circuses were in town at the time, and you might start investigating that first, rather than
Why the hell was he dressed as a clown?
Charlie, listen, this is the same organization that looks at a photo and says, oh, his sister is in Nassau.
Nassau.
That's where the bombs are at. His sister is there.
Yeah. Hey, wait, I don't care where the bombs are. His sister's fucking hot. She might have 8 pussies.
Let me start searching her.
Anyway, okay, and then otherwise, so what does Bond do instead of investigate the circus? Because I don't know, I guess he's got two things, right? He can either investigate why 009 is in a clown outfit, or he can follow the whole lead about the egg, right, that's being sold at Sotheby's. So he goes to Sotheby's because that's probably the more direct route to get to his bad guy who he thinks is going to be the seller. Sure. Yeah. I really do love that moment. I love when Bond is a provocateur. I like when he goes somewhere to, like in From Russia with Love, he goes to spring a trap. He literally provokes Kamal Khan.
Have you gone mad? Let's see how badly he wants it.
Who, as he's saying, he's like, normally he's a seller. This time he's a buyer. Well, why? Oh, he must desperately need this original back. Well, let's figure out why. I think that lends to why the opening of this film is so strong. The first half of the movie is very strong because it introduces a lot of, minus the prologue, which again, I think the prologue's badass, but it has no weight on the actual plot. The plot begins with our clown. Why was 009 dressed as a clown? Why does 009 have this egg? He's replacing 009, and as we've said before, Bond having connections to fellow 00s is always cool. We don't have a lot of it, but when we do, it's pretty cool. And he goes to this auction, and he provokes the bad guy, and that sends him on his way. That covers like the first half of the movie, and once we get to India, everything kind of weakens. And then once we get back to Berlin, it strengthens. And then once we get back to India, it weakens. So that's kind of our divide throughout the whole movie is like, yes, the tuk-tuk chase is fun. I'll say that when it comes down to Kamal Khan, I think Kamal Khan is a broken record guy when it comes to keeping Bond alive. It never really feels like there are too many assassins, and it never feels like Kamal Khan is just stupid. Like, why don't you just shoot him in the face? Because the first time he's bested, he's like,
spend the money quickly, Mr. Bond.
And then he sends Turban Guy on him, and Bond bests him and a bunch of other assassins in a wacky chase, but it still works because it's our first one. Bond gets away, all well and good. Then after that, Kamal Khan sends Blondie to be like, hey, I'm going to bang you and you're going to give me the egg. And Bond's like, okay, because I want you to take the egg anyway. But then they kidnap Bond because the whole thing is we're going to torture you to figure out what you know. Because, you know, for Kamal Khan, he's like, I need to know if he knows about Berlin and that we're going to bomb it.
Well, supposing, for argument's sake, I don't feel like talking. Well, don't worry, you will.
But then Bond ends up escaping. Then he tries to hunt Bond. Bond still escapes, and Kamal Khan's like,
Mr. Bond is indeed a very rare breed, soon to be made extinct.
Then when he goes to report to Octopussy,
Bond has escaped.
How careless of you.
I apologize.
Oh, by the way, Kamal, I'd like you to meet my new house guest.
An old friend of the family, you might say.
So then at that point, he then hires assassins to then storm Babe Island to take Bond out, but spare Octopussy. So it all feels natural, and it doesn't feel contrived. It doesn't feel like Kamal Khan's a stupid asshole who should just find somebody to shoot Bond in the face. It all feels like he kind of underestimates him at first, and Bond naturally gets away from these situations. It doesn't feel like Live and Let Die or like Moonraker. Just keep hiring assassins to try to kill Bond, and then the guy in charge looks like an idiot. It all feels natural within the plot, and that Kamal Khan is not an idiot. He's actually still a really smart guy, even up to the end. Basically, Octopussy, she's like, I want to see Bond.
His name is James Bond.
Bring him here.
He's dangerous.
And Kamal Khan's like, that's a bad idea. I think we should just torture him for information instead. Because again, in his mind, he's like, I want to know if Bond knows anything about this bomb. I don't care about you, Octopussy. I'm going to betray you anyway. I've got fruit flies around my beer. But then Bond escapes his compound, heads over to Babe Island to figure out what's going on there. He confronts Octopussy, who then tells him, you're actually responsible for my father's death. And Bond's like, well, do you want vengeance? She's like, no, I've actually always wanted to thank you for giving him an alternative to...
I don't remember that in the scene.
That was a queef. That was meant to represent an Octopussy queef.
From which of her 8 pussies?
One of 8. That's an 1/8 of a queef. Anyway, so yeah, but like I do.
Like Jesus.
You're killing me, dude. You are killing me with this movie.
Why?
You've turned this movie into like the slow death. I'm like,
the man with the 8 pussies.
Has anybody ever analyzed it to death like this?
Yes, and it's killing me because it's not helping the movie's case.
No.
It's slowly revealing the problems.
What's weird
with this
is
movie.
I enjoyed the movie.
If you overanalyze it, this is not a good movie.
That's
not a
every
great
This is a
Roger
movie
Moore
that is
movie.
meant to be watched while you're like off your fucking rocker.
You guys are helping temper my excitement on the movie.
I will say this, Charlie, about the relationship with Bond and Octopussy. It feels like an added element to just give the story a little something. And I'm not going to say it like it hurts the movie by any means, because it doesn't. But it's also like, oh, cool, these characters had history. It's kind of there. Like, he knew her dad, and then and it's like mentioned in like 2 scenes, I think. Like, not even multiple scenes, really. It's just kind of a scene where they're in the bedroom and they go
One scene.
They go to one room to the bedroom.
Then she storms off in anger towards her bed so conveniently for Bond to follow. Oh, you ran to your bed? Perfect.
But there's a line about them being 2 of a kind.
You're right. We are 2 of a kind.
I feel like a better movie would embellish all that and make it so that, like, the end of the movie, a Bond trying to save her from Kamala Harris at the end of the movie would have made more sense. But the end of the movie doesn't make sense.
We all need to be saved. I think if they had one more intimate scene with something to specifically point them out as two of a kind, because her whole thing is this, right? She's like, I've always wanted to meet you. You're responsible for my father's death, but my father was also a criminal. You gave him a better way out than him facing a court martial. Like, my family's still rich because he stole all this gold from like Korea or whatever. That's all well and good, but because it's an interesting twist, right? We think that Octopussy wants him dead, but if you rewatch the movie, when she's doing her Blofeld thing and he says this guy's name is James Bond, she pauses for a second. She's like, I want you to bring him to me, because in her mind, we think she wants him dead, but in her mind, she's like, I've always wanted to meet James Bond. Holy shit, this is my time.
I'd hoped fate would bring us together one day.
So when Bond shows up, they have their cute little moment of like, whatever, I feel like I've known you forever. And then Kamal Khan comes in and he's like, Bond escaped, and she's like, you idiot. Oh, anyway, I want you to meet my friend, James Bond. And Bond walks in. He's like, oh, you could say I'm a friend of the family. Like, it's just, it's Bond jumping into his smooth you. Like, he just walks between the raindrops because he's awesome, because he's great, because he's awesome. But then, but they needed one more scene for us to feel like they really fell in love, because all we got instead was Octopussy says, hey, I'd like you to work for me.
I'm not for hire.
Naturally, you do it for Queen and country.
Again, Bond reminding the audience he doesn't care about money. He cares about king and country. And she's like, well, fuck you then. You who you to judge me? You don't know me, Bond. And then, and then runs over to the bed, and then they fall on it all romantically. Like,
the movie's trying to do something interesting, but it just doesn't improve the movie for me. It's just kind of like, this is the thing.
Is Gogol a good guy?
Gogol's kind of always been a good guy.
He's kind of a good guy in this film. You're like, he doesn't want to start war. He wants to stop Orlov.
Dude, he's literally M. You would never say that M is a bad guy. But if M has a method of getting an upper hand on the Russians, he'll take it.
Yeah.
Gogol, he's a good guy, but if he has a method of if he can get the ATAC, like if M can get the Lecter, he's going to get the Lecter. If Gogol can get the ATAC, he's going to get the ATAC. But they're not going to kill millions of people.
I want to avoid full-out fucking war because it's pointless. Like, sit down, young one.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's kind of same with Octopussy, that I get the dynamic, but I don't know. It very conveniently she switches into an ally almost too quickly.